4 years ago, I thought I had a special relationship that unfortunately had no choice but to end. A year ago, I found out that was all a lie. Hey guys, and welcome to the first episode of Life Vetted. Thank you for being here, and thank you for tuning in. I think it's important to understand a little bit about me and the way that I grew up before we get into the topic of today's episode. I am a Miami born and raised girl. I come from a pretty dysfunctional family, as most of us do. And so I grew up seeing a lot of toxicity in relationships. And in hindsight, I can see how I contributed to that toxicity in my own personal relationships. Growing up as a teenager into my early 20s, there was a lot of that underneath the surface. Now, I didn't know that I was doing it for a very long time. The majority part of my life, I had no idea that this is what my method was. But after starting therapy seriously in 2014, when my daughter was born, I can self-assess a lot of the things that were happening, and I can tell you that I was definitely a contributing factor to a lot of the breakdown and toxicity in those relationships. I'm not going to take full credit. However, I will be able to take some of the credit now. I think it's important for me to mention that because the person I was in 2018, which is where this story starts, is not the person that I was any time before that. When my daughter was born in 2014, I decided that I needed to take seriously the fact that I was a mother, and that I needed to figure out what was going on internally. And that's when I started to go to therapy regularly. I had gone to therapy before while living in Miami, but I never really took it real serious like I did after my daughter was born. I knew that the clock was ticking, and that if I didn't do something to change myself, then my daughter was going to suffer the same fate that I did as a child. So in 2018, when I met my now ex-fiance, I was a much more self-aware person. I was a much more emotionally mature person. And I felt that I had enough tools in my toolbox to be equipped to handle a relationship in a more positive and mature way. The funny part about this whole thing is that talk therapy can only take you so far. I don't know if you guys have ever heard like that saying that people say, science only goes so far, then comes God. Well, talk therapy only goes so far, and then you have to dig deeper. It's not anything that you can do or say. It's more of an internal, I would like to call it spiritual journey that you have to go on in order to really reach the next level of change. Talk therapy can help you identify, why you've acted certain ways in the past, or why you get triggered by certain people or certain actions. But in order to heal those things, you can't heal them just by talking. There has to be something that happens, or something that you do internally, spiritually. You can't touch it, but you can feel it, in order to really, really heal all those wounds that you've been carrying around your whole life. And that was my experience. So to begin, I would like to say, be kind to yourself. And as you listen to this story, make sure that you listen and you don't judge. So in 2018, I met someone who I thought was going to be my someone forever. Coming at it from a more self-aware place, and a place where you kind of know what you've done wrong and what you don't want to do, is different. Because a lot of the times when we are in these relationships and we don't really know ourselves in a deep way, we are kind of on autopilot. And so we just do what we've always done. But coming into this particular relationship, like I said, I had a lot more self-awareness. And so I felt like I could handle it and be mature and really make this work. When I met this person, I had a friend from Miami that lived here. She lived up in Denver, and I remember telling her that I had met this cute guy and that, we planned on hanging out. And I remember her telling me that I should just make it a fling, because I had just recently separated from my daughter's father, and that I should just have a fling because I had never had one in my life and I shouldn't take it too seriously. And boy, do I wish that I would have listened to her. I didn't do it intentionally. However, it is not in my nature to be casual with anything that I do. If I love you, then I love you. If I am going to decorate a room, then I am going to decorate the room. If I am going to do anything, I don't do it half-ass. I either do it or I do not do it at all. And however great my intention was to be very casual with this particular relationship, it just did not play out that way. My intentions were to just have fun and maybe never see this person ever again. Something I had never done before, but I was open to the idea, and it just didn't work out that way. I hung out with this person one time, and he never left me alone after that. It was a very nice feeling, I'm not going to lie, because I had come from a relationship that had turned very cold, unromantic. So when this man did not leave me alone after hanging out with them and was the complete opposite of where I had come from, it felt very nice. I mean, it was these grand declarations of love that made me feel like this is exactly how it should be. When he was bringing me flowers every week to work and taking my car to get washed, and the flowers that were brought weren't even dead yet, and I would get brand new flowers. And everyone was witness to this at my job. It felt good. Now, a lot of you would probably give that a term called love bombing, which did not exist in 2018, okay? All those terms came after 2020. And you know what? Even if those terms were around in 2018 and somebody would have been like, oh, he's just love bombing you, I probably wouldn't even have listened, because to me, everything that he was doing, declaring his love for me and, taking me out to dinner all the time and taking me out to lunch and waiting for my shift to end so that he can take me out, or bringing me lunch randomly and bringing me flowers and balloons and just all these things, to me, it was like, yeah, duh, of course you're in love with me after knowing me a couple of weeks. I'm great. I'm amazing. And so even if that term did exist, I probably would have ignored it, because that's just how I feel. And so at the pinnacle of our relationship, it was beautiful. It was like I had always dreamed it could be. And part of that thinking was because I said to myself, I have done the work to figure out what's going on with me. So I'm coming into this particular relationship from a different place than all my past relationships, every single one of them. This one, I was coming in more aware of me. And so because I was coming into it more aware of me, then it had to be better, right? For a long time, I kept myself at a hand's distance. And what I mean by that is that although I was being showered with all this love and attention from this person, I tried to make sure that I didn't get too deep. Okay, it took me 6 months to really just let down my guard and be like, all right, F it. I'm just gonna drown in all of this love as well. So it took me a little bit, because part of me was scared, but part of me was also like, am I doing the right thing? And he just wore me down. What can I say? He just wore me down. It took 6 months for me to just be like, all right, fine. I will jump in this deep ocean with you. And like I said, I don't do anything half-ass. So when I finally made that decision to jump in the deep end, it was too late after that. I was in it. And I think I did a pretty good job of keeping my two lives separate. My daughter didn't recognize him as anything but just a friend for the first 2 years that we were together. We would hang out with his children and my daughter, but never really just my daughter and him and me. I tried to be the best that I could in that regard. He never came over or slept over when my daughter was there, things like that. I just thought, like I said, I was in a different headspace, and I really wanted to do what was best, and I thought to myself that if I did everything textbook style, that I had a higher chance of really making this work. And that just tells you, like, just throw the book out. There is no book on life, okay? There is no manual that you can read. Like, it just doesn't exist. I thought that I could do things the right way and that things would just turn out the right way, and that just wasn't the case. So after 2 years, he proposed, and about a month or two after he proposed, we moved in together. 2020. Probably a month after the world just went crazy, that's when we moved in together. And there was a bit of a change in his persona after that. I have to preface this by saying that I had never seen that man take a drink in front of me. I think we went out one time with some work friends and he had like a beer. I knew of him going to the bar because that's something that people here in Colorado do, but I never went with him. And in my presence, there was no drinking, no drugs, any of that. Now, side note, coming from Miami, we tend to party at a young age. And as we grow up, you see a lot of people who do some Coca-Cola and drink. But both are synonymous, like, with each other. If you're drinking, you're doing Coca-Cola, and if you're doing Coca-Cola, you're drinking. I never really met anybody growing up who only had an alcohol problem. My brother's father had an alcohol problem, but I was young. I never was close with them, so I never really saw a person who was just an alcoholic. I knew people that liked to do Coca-Cola a whole lot, and I could pick one of those people out from a crowd. But when it came to alcohol, I never really had any kind of experience. And you might think that's a little naive or whatever, but I just did not. Even my past relationships, they all had Coca-Cola problems, but never just an alcohol problem. So when I moved to Colorado and met this person and had like a corporate job, I would hear people about going to the bar and having glasses of wine every night after work and drinking it up on the weekends. And so it all seemed pretty normal to me. And in my presence, I never really saw anything that was super alarming. So I left it at that and kept on going. When we moved in together, I saw a definite change in his behavior. And a little bit before we moved in together, I can tell that there was something wrong, or that there might be a bigger problem than I thought, but he was handling it. In my eyes, coming from the kinds of relationships that I had, when me and him had an argument or when me and him had a disagreement, nobody was getting aggressive. Nobody was punching a wall or breaking a door or becoming physically violent. So to me, I was like, well, this is pretty healthy because people argue and we argue, but we argue in a normal way. Nothing was that alarming that I felt like I was in danger. And at that time, I was already in the deep end, and so I was in love. So there was the rose-colored glasses were definitely on. All I knew is that I was handling myself differently, and that should be enough to make this relationship work because I was showing up in a different way. So that's a good thing. That's how I saw it. And when we moved in together, I think that he was keeping it together for so long that he could not keep it together anymore. We were together a total of almost 4 years, and I think that he finally could not keep up this facade that he had built up while being with me. It's hard to think about because there's two sides to this story. One side is that I had moved in and become engaged to a person who had a severe alcohol problem, bigger than I ever imagined. And the other side of this story is that this person not only had an alcohol problem, he had a lying problem, a manipulation problem, a gaslighting problem that I had absolutely no idea existed. In my past relationships, because I didn't know how I was showing up and what I was doing, because we are our subconscious mind. We think that we are in charge of what we do, but in reality, our subconscious is the computer that's running the program. And so in my past relationships, when bad things would happen, I really wouldn't understand why they were happening. But on top of that, I would feel a little guilty because maybe subconsciously I knew that I was contributing to some of that. In this relationship, when bad things would happen, I did not, for the life of me, understand what was going on because I knew that from where I was standing, I was doing the best I could to be a good human and to be a good partner to this person. And so I think that's why, if I go really deep into it, I still have some residual emotions of everything that occurred because I know in my heart that I came into it from a better headspace. And I knew that I was not doing anything to trigger these outbursts. The relationship became less and less safe for me to be in. Less and less safe for me physically to be in, emotionally to be in, and like my soul to be in. I got out in the nick of time. And I was very depressed once I got out of it because I had done everything right. How could it not have worked? That was 4 years ago in 2021. When I called everything off, in my head, I said, well, I can't be with someone who has these issues. I have to protect myself. And I was okay with that. And I started healing from that place that I had made the right decision because this person has a problem. About a year and a half ago, I discover that what I thought was a special relationship apart from the demons that he had was not so special at all. It turns out that this was a pattern that had been happening in this person's life pretty much his entire life. And although I still believe that he was at his best while with me, he was in an upward trajectory in his life while he was with me in regards to his work, his home, everything. He had a lot of things going for him. He had this pattern of jumping from relationship to relationship to relationship to relationship. I was not aware of any of this. And I found it out through a pretty reliable source, okay? And my whole world was crushed all over again because I could live with the fact that the addiction, the disease, was what kept him from me. But apart from that, we had something special, right? I can live with that. I've had many people that I've cared about be taken away from me because of addiction. That kind of eases it a little bit, at least, because once you have that disease and you are so in it, it takes over everything and it almost becomes not even your choice anymore to a certain extent. Please understand, to a certain extent. So I could live with that fact. But after finding out that all of this is a pattern, all the declarations of love, all the goodness that came from him was a pattern, and not only was it the addiction and the disease, but also that I was just pretty much another mark in his game of chess or checkers or whatever that reopened a wound that I had that I was healing from in a completely different way. I found out about, like I said, a year and a couple months that he was with someone else literally a month after we broke up. It all blew up in my face, pretty much. He was jumping around from person to person to person to person until he finally found someone who will let him just crash at their house without having to do a single thing. He lost everything after we broke up. He had an amazing job with the city or with the county. And he lost that. He pretty much lost all the privileges that he had personally with like his kids and all these things. And he was doing what he's always done, which is jump from relationship to relationship, looking for someone to nurture him and take care of him. He knew that when he met me, he would have to step up because I don't give off the vibe of a sugar mama, if you will. And so I think what happened is that he knew he had to step up and be this other level of a person if he really wanted to be with me. And I think that he did that for so long and he could not keep up with it anymore because his natural state was not that. And that's when everything blew up. We had built a house together. We had plans together. We were planning on buying a home. There was, a lot of things involved. And he just blew it up. And I thought that we had something special, but apparently he's done this a few times. And so forward to 2024, I come to find out that he is now living with someone who is also an alcoholic. She maintains the home. He does not work. He doesn't have a driver's license. He has no job, hasn't had a real job since forever. She maintains him. They live together. I mean, in awful conditions. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because, like I said, I really felt that there was something there and I just got unlucky because that this person had this problem. And coming to find out that it's not that they just had this problem, is that they're not a good person at all. Even without the alcohol, they're not a good person, is heartbreaking. Also to find out that, in true narcissistic tendencies, when you break that person's heart, and this is just stuff I've read on the internet. I am not going to diagnose someone on my podcast. However, I will say that after I broke it off with him and he was so hurt that I did and couldn't understand why I did, couldn't understand why I would just stick by him as he got progressively more dangerous and progressively worse in his disease, why I couldn't just stand by him like his mother stood by his father when his father was abusing alcohol. He turned around and pretty much turned his whole family against me. A family that I adored and I thought also adored me. He turned them all around and pretty much spread a lot of lies that they believe. And he did what he could to hurt my character and my morals. I don't have to go into details about all the horrifying things that he did to me in order to express to you guys that if I wouldn't have gotten out of that, I probably would have either been in jail or one of us would have been dead. And the reason why I don't want to go into too much detail is because he has children that I care about, and they don't need to hear in detail all the horrifying things that their father did to me. And it goes back. It wasn't just me. It was everyone that he had ever encountered in a relationship. It was a trend. And so I don't need to do that because I'm trying to be sensitive to them because they have to live with that. I got out just in time. I dodged a huge bullet. The moral of this story and the message of this story is not the terrible things that was done to me. I believe with 1,000% of my soul that I had to become self-aware. I had to show up into this relationship the way that I did so that when it blew up on me, exactly how it did, and when I found out all the information that I found out, I did not doubt for a second that I had any fault in it. If I had still been the person that I was in my previous lives, I would probably have never elevated and ascended to the person that I am sitting here today. The fact that I knew that I had never done anything wrong or manipulating to harm this man or his family, I knew that it all came from him. That is how I was able to really move on. I fell in love with him, and my heart was pure and my intentions were pure, that when all of this went down and I found out all the information that I found out, I was so shattered that there was nowhere for me to go than within myself. And I went through this spiritual journey because I said, well, I did everything right. I went into this relationship and I showed up in a more mature, self-aware way. And that didn't matter. So there has to be more. There has to be something bigger here for me to learn, for me to find out about myself. And if it hadn't played out exactly the way that it played out, none of this would have came about. My idea for this podcast would have never came about. My renowned, faith in myself, my spirituality, getting closer to source, getting closer to the things that you can't see or touch or smell or taste. It took me down a path where I was so heartbroken because I knew that I hadn't done anything wrong. And I was done wrong. And I was so heartbroken that I could not fathom being with anyone else. I wanted to be with someone else. I wanted to go back to what I've always done, but I couldn't because I was so heartbroken. And so I just stayed alone. I had no choice. I was so distraught that my journey led me to exactly what I needed, which was to be by myself. And I have been. I have been by myself since then. And I am so grateful for that. Because in my whole life, I am what you call a serial monogamer. I don't know if that's a word, but I am what you call a serial monogamer. I've never really had flings or a one-night stand, but I've always had relationships, all constant. And so it had to play out the way that it played out in order for me to find the love that was missing. And the love that was missing was for myself. I mentioned before that talk therapy only gets you so far. Something has to happen in your life so dramatic that it forces you to change. For me, that first thing was having my daughter. That changed me completely. And then the second thing that happened to me was this relationship blowing up in my face like it did. That pushed me over the edge to really figure out what more is there. And being alone has really made it possible for me to explore all these different parts of myself. You know, I do not smoke weed anymore. I don't drink alcohol anymore. And these are all decisions that I made in order to gain more clarity. And it's helped me throughout all of this. I have, for the first time, really been able to heal. In the past, I thought that, I was healing by doing certain things, but it wasn't until this moment that I realized that what I needed was to be in solitude. The universe will push you to learn the lessons that it needs to teach you. You can avoid it for a while, and trust me, from experience, you can avoid it. However, life will teach you what it needs to teach you, and you can learn it the hard way, or you can learn it the easier way. But it will grab you by the hair, kicking and screaming, until it proves its point. And it did that for me. I have found spirituality through this. I have found a faith that I never had, that I've been looking for since I was like 18, but I have found it now. And I have found a love and respect for myself through this whole experience. Some of it comes from the fact that I can honestly say that I have been by myself for 4 years, and I see society and people around me and just the way that things are, where people find their validation in someone else, in being with other people. There's a lot of situations where people just can't be by themselves. They just can't do it. And I'm proud of myself that I have actually been able to be quiet, my mind be quiet, and me confront all the things I needed to on my own. It took a lot of guts for me to walk away from that relationship. And as I sit here today and tell the story, I can honestly say that for the first time ever, I was not a contributor to the toxicity in that relationship. And I can honestly say that I gave that person my best. I am okay with finding out that it was all a lie and it was all fake. And I'm okay with that. Because I wasn't. For the first time, I was not. I was genuine. I was really in there, really authentic to the whole situation. He does not deserve an episode. He does not deserve for me to be talking about him for any amounts of minutes. But I knew I had to tell the story because that is the beginning of my complete transformation. And now that I have said it and it's out there and you guys now know why I've decided to make this podcast, I feel free. I feel like I can let it go and I feel like I don't ever have to talk about it ever again. The reason why you see me emotional in that countdown to episode 1 is not because I miss him or because I love him or any of that. It's because I remember the girl who went into a relationship with an open mind and an open heart, and she was done really wrong. And I cry because even after all the darkness and bad things that I was put through, he did not harden me. I still believe in good people. I still believe in love. I still believe in showing up and being authentic. And when you have the chance to love, love hard. I would not change anything from my experience. I needed to go to a dark place and be broken in order for all the light to come rushing in. So I want to thank him. Thank you. Thank you for showing me that it was always me. The most special thing that I loved about you was me. I made you special. I'm okay with that. When you're ready, the lessons will find you. This is Life Vetted. Until next time.